It's Saturday, January 19th, 2019, and I'm back. There will be some changes. May go over those at another time. The look is going to be exactly the same. This is it. This is what I got to work with. Sorry, it's it. So, as you're going to see in the title, Antonio Brown. Somebody please take him. Pittsburgh Steelers can't keep him. Now, here's the problem with Antonio Brown in this situation. He's actually in a great situation where he is right now. He doesn't realize how good of a situation he is in currently. Antonio Brown has a quarterback that has a big arm that can get the ball deep to him. He has a very talented wide receiver on the other side that makes it hard to double Antonio on his side. Because if you don't pay attention to Juju Schuster, Antonio Brown is going to burn you. If you don't pay attention to, if you don't pay attention to Juju Schuster, he'll burn you, or Antonio will burn you. So Ben can just go, okay, who are they favoring more on which side? And then I can throw over there. Now, Antonio Brown's situation reminds me a little bit of Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson, in one of his last years in Cincinnati, decided that he was going to become more vocal than normal. And he started pissing off Carson Palmer. Now, he'd always been vocal. He'd always kind of been about himself. But he really started amping it up and getting on Carson Palmer's nerves. On the other side was a very talented wide receiver named T.J. Houshmandzadeh. Now, Houshmandzadeh never really did much when he didn't have somebody else on the other side of him, like a Chad Johnson. But Houshmandzadeh was good enough when Chad Johnson was getting double-teamed that he made the catches, and he was getting all of the catches. Chad Johnson had he had a down year because Carson Palmer just wasn't looking for him anymore. He was pissed off, he was fed up with him, and Houshmandzadeh was a very good replacement on the other side to throw the ball to. This is what it reminds me of a little bit with Antonio Brown. On the other side is Juju Schuster. Very good young wide receiver. Antonio Brown over there, where is it easier to throw? It's easier to throw to the other side where he's only being single covered, talented wide receiver being single covered. It's easier to throw over there for Ben Roethlisberger, so a lot more throws started going that direction. Now, Antonio Brown has still led the team in receptions and led the team in, yards and everything. But Juju Schuster made a lot of strides this year. He looked really good, and he's more of a team player than AB is. So if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers now, you got to get rid of AB. He's got to go. He's too expensive of a wide receiver. He will start to decline. Not next year, not the year after, but maybe 3 years from now. But is it worth keeping a guy around that makes that much money? Now, I think he's only got 2 years left on the contract, but that's a lot of years in the NFL to have left on your contract. So you got to get rid of him. You got to send him somewhere. Well, where are you going to send him? You're not sending him inside the division. You're not sending him to Cleveland because Cleveland's going to be better than you next year. You're not going to give him another weapon. You're not going to send him to Cincinnati only because they got A.J. Green on the other side. Cincinnati's not going to tie up $30 to $35 million in wide receivers. They're just not going to do it. And Baltimore, forget it. Baltimore is not getting a good player from Pittsburgh. You're not going to get that. So then you start thinking, well, what about the AFC? Pittsburgh's not going to trade within the AFC. The only time you might want to see Antonio Brown is a regular season game or maybe, if his team is lucky enough, the Super Bowl. So you're not going to send him to an AFC team that could, with the addition of a player like Antonio Brown, make them better and get them into the playoffs and maybe jeopardize your chance to get into the playoffs because last year they didn't make it. They were out in the cold while Baltimore was in and Indianapolis and Houston and, they're out in the cold this year. So that leaves the NFC. Well, where do you trade him? I want a good draft pick for Antonio Brown. He wants to go to San Francisco. That's not a bad fit. Problem. Garoppolo is a young quarterback. Antonio Brown is one of those guys who is kind of he's a prick. He's got a lot of money and he's starting to act like a prick. So now it's like you're putting that kind of a wide receiver with a young quarterback. It's probably not the best fit for the quarterback because he's going to have a lot of Antonio Brown in his ear. And that's probably not the best thing. Now, I will say this. Antonio Brown is not as bad as Terrell Owens, but he's starting to trend that direction. And here's the problem. Terrell Owens got booted off a lot of teams, and he was a great wide receiver, and he got left behind by a lot of teams. Antonio Brown is a great receiver. But here's the thing about Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens was always smart enough to know, first year with the new team, be on your best behavior. Antonio Brown will be on his best behavior for whoever he plays for next year, unless it's Pittsburgh. Then he just probably won't be on good behavior at all. He might not even play. But he'll be on his best behavior next year for whatever team he goes to, because he's going to want to prove all those people wrong that say, I'm not a good teammate. So he's going to be good to his team. He's going to be supportive. He's going to work hard. He's going to do all the stuff that he needs to do to be a good player. It's what Terrell Owens did like 3 times. He did it when he went to Philadelphia. He did it when he went to, I think it was, after that he went to Dallas. And it might have been Dallas and then Philadelphia, and then he went to Buffalo. But at every one of those teams, I may have the Dallas-Philadelphia thing mixed up. But all those teams, he was on his best behavior for the first year. Remember the whole, he's my quarterback. That's my quarterback. I remember that. He was so emotional. And then the next year, he's ripping Romo because he passes too much to, he passed too much to the tight end. I can't remember his name. I always want to call him Novacek. And he's better than Novacek, and I can never remember his name. He's just very boring. But he's very talented, but he's just boring. But I always forget his name. I'm sure a Dallas fan will type it down in capital letters in the comments, and I won't care. So, Terrell Owens was always on his best behavior. Antonio Brown will pull the same trick. He'll be on his best behavior for 1 year. So sending him to San Francisco is all right with Kyle Shanahan. You also get a really high draft pick. Another place that he think he would go, Green Bay. Now it's cold. I don't know if Antonio Brown, but he played in Pittsburgh. So we can't say that can't play in the cold because he played in Pittsburgh. So Green Bay, once again, NFC team. Green Bay, I know they don't like to make a lot of trades like this. I know this is not in their MO. But they need somebody like this for Aaron Rodgers. This gives Aaron Rodgers a legitimate, deep threat, big-time number one. No doubt he's a number one wide receiver. I know that he makes some other wide receivers look like number one receivers, but they're not really as good. It's just because Aaron Rodgers is so dang good. So Green Bay would be a good team. Another really good team to send him to. Young quarterback, but he's pretty much a steady guy already as Carson Wentz. Philadelphia. Philadelphia is this close to getting back to the Super Bowl again. They had such a talented defense, but you could tell some of those offensive weapons weren't quite what they really need to be. Foles did an admirable job, but Carson Wentz is really the better quarterback. Give him Antonio Brown, that team could get back into the Super Bowl. And Pittsburgh's not going to be there. I'm sorry. Pittsburgh, give up on that fact. You're not going to the Super Bowl next year. You had a lot of talented players this year, and you didn't even make the playoffs. So your time is basically done. I'm sorry. If you're a Pittsburgh fan, I hate to say this to you, but it's like it's over for that team's Super Bowl window is shut. It will be opened again someday, but for now, it's closed. You're not getting back to the Super Bowl anytime soon. I know you want to point to all the young players that you got, but your quarterback is getting old, and he's starting to look it. And you don't have a guy behind him who's ready to take over yet. So, right now, looking at Pittsburgh the way they are, the defense, mediocre, offense, really good sometimes, not good other times. So, it's like, you're not going to worry. Don't worry about meeting Antonio Brown in the Super Bowl because you ain't going to be there. If you trade him to Green Bay, I don't even think it would get Green Bay to the Super Bowl. I think there are just too many. I think there are just too many talented teams. You put him on Philadelphia, he may end up in the Super Bowl. But there are a lot of talented teams in that NFC, especially with having the Rams. The Bears are going to be better next year. Seattle is starting to improve, and that's another team I would even look at sending him to, because Russell Wilson is a leader. He is a leader, and he is a very well-respected man in the locker room. So you put Antonio Brown there for him for a year. Seattle looked a lot better than I thought they would. This would give Russell Wilson an outside threat. Like I said, there are teams that he could go to. And I'll even say the LA Rams. I'm going to say the LA Rams, and I'll say this for one reason. They are aggressive in free agency. They are willing to spend the money. They don't care. You give them an Antonio Brown to go with Jared Goff, to go with Todd Gurley. I don't know if they're going to still keep C.J. Anderson as well as he's playing, but you have some very good players there. Putting Antonio Brown on that team, whew. But you might need more defensive help than offensive help. Your offense doesn't struggle that much. But if you're gonna look at teams, those could be teams. Now, a team that might trade for him that kind of maybe needs a wide receiver, Arizona. You got a young quarterback there. I don't really recommend putting Antonio Brown with a young quarterback, but then again, you've got to give your young quarterbacks weapons. And I think that Josh Rosen in Green Bay could benefit from having a guy like that on the outside. So there are a lot of places that he could go. It's just, does anybody want that in the locker room? We've seen that it just causes more problems. Remember, Chad Johnson never won a Super Bowl. Terrell Owens never won a Super Bowl. These were guys that, unless Chad Johnson got one with the Patriots, but I don't remember if he did or not. But he wasn't the main reason. He wasn't a main component. At that time, he was just kind of a starter that was out on the field. But if you look at Chad Johnson's numbers for New England, they were pathetic because he wasn't smart enough to understand the offense. And those are his words. He just didn't get it. So that's pretty much what I think. You got to get rid of Antonio Brown. If you're going to send him to the NFC, there are a lot of candidates out there. Arizona, bad team, high draft pick. You could get a good draft pick for yourself, and you can send him to a young quarterback that may make him better someday. The San Francisco 49ers, also, young quarterback, needs a wide receiver of AB's talent, plus a high draft pick for yourselves. So those work out. Seattle, they might just be a wide receiver away from being a really potent offense and challenging again for Super Bowls. The Rams, just because they spend money like they're drinking glasses of water. Green Bay, because Aaron Rodgers, give him another chance to get to the Super Bowl. Give him weapons. Philadelphia could win the Super Bowl with a guy like Antonio Brown on the outside. Because, like I said, he'll be on his best behavior for one more year. So that's my take. If somebody's got to take, there's a lot of options out there to take Antonio Brown. It's just, will any of these teams want him in his locker room? And what happens to Pittsburgh if they can't unload him? Do they just release him? I don't release him. I'm sorry. I let him sit on the sidelines. It's like, if you release him, it's dead money anyway on the contract, and you don't want him going where he wants to go. You want to send him where it benefits you. So if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm sitting there and I'm saying, I'm not going to let this guy go. I got 2 years. I don't have to let him go. I can keep him. He's got 2 years left on the contract, so I don't have to get rid of him. So if you want a chance at a really good wide receiver for a couple of years, talk to me. Bring picks. We'll deal. That's it.